are joined by, you might have heard that guy back there laughing it up. That is Martin Fuzzball Willis.
Fuzzball? How'd you know I didn't shave today? Wow. This is just audio, isn't it? Are you peering
Well, I
through
think
my camera?
the line was furball. I was trying to say because you were laughing it up, laugh it up, furball, from
yeah.
Star Wars. By the way, did you see the new Star Wars?
Yeah, I did, and it's a movie I could watch twice. It was really good. Watched it in 3D, and I was thinking about watching it conventionally.
Yeah,
How about you?
That
was a great movie, I thought.
Yeah, I watched it conventionally. I really liked it too, and I need to watch it on 3D because I saw it. I mean, conventional, and I was sitting in not the best seat, so I was able to enjoy the story and get the story. But I want to go see the 3D IMAX so I can really just focus on and take in the visuals.
Yeah, not too many movies would I say that I'd want to watch twice, but that definitely is. We won't do any spoilers, but it's really good. I think it's really good, and I think Disney did a heck of a job. They didn't spare a penny. They did a very, very good job with it.
What's J.J. Abrams? I mean, that guy's amazing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know George Lucas called it sort of like a divorce between after he sold it, of course, for $4 billion. He was going to be doing some consulting and backed off on that.
Good.
And he actually watched it and he did a thumbs up. So you never know what someone like him is going to say.
You know what? I love Star Wars. I love Indiana Jones, other things that he's created.
Yeah.
But there was this petition to have him direct the next movies. Please, Lord, no. I think that George Lucas does not need to direct. I mean, he had, with the last three, there was some good visuals and stuff. There's some stuff that came out of it. But the directing, the acting was so flat. The actors complained that, they just didn't have the time that they needed. And these are amazing actors. So I don't think you can blame the actors for the last movie. So, yeah, I think George Lucas should just stay away because they did very well with this movie.
Yes, and I like the girl they introduced. I thought she was excellent.
Yeah.
And Harrison Ford, I think, plays a great part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wasn't super keen on Carrie Fisher, but, that's just, maybe it's the role she played. I'm not really sure, but Harrison Ford, I thought, did a great job, as usual.
I can't believe you said that. The Carrie Fisher.
I know. Oh,
no,
wow.
Actually, this is funny you bring this up. I think I agree with you. I could see why you would say that. But I don't know if people realize this, and we Google, because when me and my girlfriend are watching TV, we Google everything, including all the actors and everything. And we just watched the first season of Scream Queens, and one of the main characters on that show is Carrie Fisher's daughter.
Huh. Wow. And how old is she? She was in her 20s, 30s?
I think 20s. Yeah, the character's supposed to be in her 20s, so I'm sure that's about where she is. So that's kind of interesting.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Huh. How about that?
Yeah.
Is she wearing the little bun things on her side of her head?
Yeah, she wears earmuffs. And you know what? Unless I missed it, they never explained why her character wears earmuffs throughout the entire thing. Although early on in the show, they did this thing where they recalled like the last year or something like that, and she wasn't wearing them. That's like the only scene where she wasn't. So there's probably something to that. I think there's a second season, so we'll probably find out later on. It probably has something to do with her killing and murdering or something, because everything in that show is kind of about that in a silly way.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real silly show. Anyway, let us move on to UFO news. And we usually let you start that off, so why don't you tell us about a UFO news story, buddy?
Well, let's talk about a triangle UFO, since it seems like that's the big model the last few years. Mm-hmm. It's a UFO, and it hovered 50 feet over Kansas City band members.
Mm-hmm.
And this happened all the way back. This was written recently by Roger Marsh. This happened. It's a recalled incident from 1978, where two fellow band members had a close encounter with an object. It was just 50 feet overhead, so we're talking about a triangle back then. And this is a case, of course, for the MUFON. And so it was back in April 1978. They were in the Midwest and rehearsing, and they just went outside at a parent's farm, and this is right outside of Kansas City, Kansas. And the guitar player, keyboard, and myself, this is a quote, went outside for a smoke break at around 8 p.m. and noticed a bright light off in the sky, the witness stated. As we watched it, it grew larger and larger and realized it was coming directly at us. And when the object arrived overhead, the group could clearly see that it was a craft in triangle or delta wing shaped, hovering silently about 50 feet above them, right over them, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was an interesting, even though it was 1978, I love that he's bringing up these old cases that are, pretty spectacular, and especially when it's talking about a triangle back then, because, I had never heard about triangles. You always heard back in the 70s about the disc and lights, but never triangles. Not that I heard of anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a really good case. Well, it's just a fun one. It's a really fun case, just because you can think of these guys, these in the 70s in their bell-bottom jeans and their mustaches, hanging around having a cigarette watching this UFO. Yeah, and like most UFOs, they say it zipped off, but into a storm, and they said it had these globes that kind of lit up, and then it disappeared. So he said that they discussed about it possibly moving into another dimension or some kind of electromagnetic thing. But yeah, that was
pretty. Yeah, it's kind of a spectacular phrase to be quoted all the way back then.
Yeah.
I think not that that science wasn't out there.
Yeah.
Another thing, had you ever heard about other dimensions and stuff back? Of course, you were a little kid in 1978. But still, I'd never heard of anyone talking about that.
You know what? I'm sure we could think out. That's interesting. Someone like Kurt Collins would be good to ask. Right. Or Chris Auerbach, the guy who wrote the book with Jacques Vallée, because they look at the historical stuff. And it would be interesting to know when this concept of other dimensions came out, but I wouldn't doubt it was a while ago. I mean, Star Trek did time travel, but not really dimensional stuff, did they? Otherwise, I can only think of like maybe Carol Ann, moving into a ghost dimension. Carol Ann. Carol Ann. And what's funny, when I say Carol Ann, that some people, us old people, all know, the kids don't know. The kids have not seen Poltergeist, and I think that this is, if I think that one of these presidential candidates need to make this a priority. There are kids out there who have not seen the classics, like Close Encounters, like Poltergeist, and that's just tragic to me.
Do you know that Steven Spielberg got the idea for Poltergeist because in Denver there's a park that they were going to dig up all the bodies in a cemetery, and they got lazy and they ended up just making a park over it. And there was all these stories, paranormal stories coming out of that park. I can't remember the name of it. I was there.
It's Cheeseman Park. I've written about it because I was the paranormal examiner back in Denver.
Of course, I should have known that. Of course.
So mine is one of the top stories out there on this. But I didn't know that it actually influenced Spielberg.
Yeah, that's how he came up with the idea of Poltergeist.
Where did you hear this? Where's your evidence for that claim?
It was on The Greatest Mysteries or something like that.
Huh, because if that's the case, that is extraordinary, and that would be extremely exciting to me because, I like to follow Spielberg closely. And in fact, my talk at the UFO Congress, I'm going to go over a case that influenced Spielberg and other movies that he did. It's fascinating, one of my favorite things, and I'm not going to share with people what that is right here, right now, because I want to share that at the Congress. But yeah, I follow Spielberg very closely with the UFO and alien stuff. And And so that would be fascinating. I'd love that link to that reference if you can find it.
I will look.
Okay. I'm not sure how we got off on this tangent.
I know.
It was probably my fault.
Fun.
Yeah. Oh, multi-dimensions and stuff, and Carol Ann. But yeah, the kids need to watch these shows. And especially because, we're going to have Doug Trumbull at the conference who did special effects for those movies. These kids haven't even seen these movies, and I just am very sad about that. That's why they're little monsters. They're little monsters. Okay, so I want to talk about this video story, which hopefully you've seen. And this was a video over Indiana of a UFO. It's just a cylindrical object kind of moving slowly across the sky. It was videotaped at 6:30 p.m. on May 26th in 2014. And Roger, which is cool, he dives into the archives and finds some of these stories. But this guy, said he saw it. He thought maybe it was an airplane at first, but it didn't have wings or a tail wing. And he says it didn't look aerodynamic at all. So he zoomed in and he couldn't figure out what it was. So he sent this case into MUFON, and the investigator, Patrick O'Brien, closed it as an unknown. He said that the Air National Guard is nearby, but they only fly C-130 aircraft, and so he felt it was unlikely this was a military craft. So he said that it was similar to other sightings, but he closed it as he just couldn't figure out what it might have been. I guess there is a phenomena where wings can not appear, but and I'm sure Mark D'Antonio could tell us more about that. Who does?
You mean, are you talking about the angle, or sort of like a mirage type of thing?
You know what? I think it's the angle, but it could be a mirage sort of thing as well. I don't remember the details. I know the angle is one of those issues, but of course then you would still see the tail. So I'm not sure. So we'd have to ask Mark about that. But it does look interesting. I mean, this thing does look like a cylinder. Have you had a chance to see that one?
I did, and I do want to comment. And it really is very unusual, and looks like quite a sighting. Actually, quite a video. The one thing I want to mention is, speaking with Jan Harrison recently, I asked him, why do they close MUFON cases, so quickly sometimes? And he said, well, they're not really closed, and they're not closed like a closed case. They can be immediately reopened if there's any further investigation. So it's not like, a legal case being closed.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good point. And just because they close it as an unknown, I mean, that just means they didn't feel comfortable enough to say they were certain it was a commercial airplane, even if they suspect that it was. So those are, really good points. They just do their best to try to figure out what it is, but sometimes they can't.
Yeah, right.
So I guess the other note on this one, too, is that this guy did show his UPS pilot friend, who said he didn't rule out a plane, but he wasn't quite sure why the wings all couldn't be seen either. So, yeah, I think this is kind of an interesting video. I'd love to get other people's opinions. It's at Open Minds TV. Yeah, one last story I think is really fun is another historical story from 1998. It was one where this girl says she came home and her grandma wanted some root beer, so she walked across the street to get some root beer. She saw an object off in the distance, and the lights kind of flickered. It was 9 p.m. when she got home, and then she said this object beamed a blue light on her. She kind of in her mind thought, nope, I don't want to see you. I think I know what you are. Get away. And then it turned off. She ran inside, and her grandma says, where were you? Because it was now 10:30. And she said, well, Grandma, come take a look at this. And she pulled her grandma outside, and they saw this UFO again. It was over a building, and the building, I guess, was lit up. But, yeah, this is kind of another really interesting historical case.
Wow. When did you say this happened?
1998.
Ah, yeah.
Is that significant to you?
1998. Let's see. I may have been going through one of my divorces. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, there's many years, and that could have been the case, but
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's true.
all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for the news.
You bet. Thanks a lot.
All right.
And we'll be talking to you just in a couple days, right?
Yeah, exactly. We'll talk to you soon. But now let's go on to the interview. Okay, so I'm sure you all are really excited to hear and curious about who our interview is with today. And guess what? I know this is someone that you like to hear from because it's me. And I'm going to talk to you about the UFO Congress. Now, wait. Before you turn off the radio thinking this is just this going to be a giant commercial, I want to talk to you about the speakers that we're going to have, because some of these people are doing some really cool, interesting UFO stuff. And I'm pretty sure that if you stick with me here and bear with me and listen to what I have to say, you're going to find it very interesting, because there's like a lot of cool stuff going on. So I want to tell you guys all about it. So even if you don't come to the conference, this will give you some insight into what's going on. And I'm actually going to go through the schedule as the timeline goes. So like we're going to start with actually the day before the conference. So you're going to find this interesting. I'm certain of it, because these speakers are so interesting and what they're up to. So stick with me, peeps, and let's do this. Okay, first, Tuesday, February 16th, we've got the EBE Film Festival screenings. So what happens is that on this day, we're actually still setting stuff up, but we set up some side rooms where we screen all of the submissions from the film festival. And this year, we have a lot. I mean, this year, the competition is really stiff. Every single one of the films is very good. I have no idea who's going to win what. But I am terrified, and I'm so bummed already that I'm going to have to tell any of these artists that their films will not be able to continue on to the rest of the conference. So what happens is after they screen all of the films, then the top 3 in each category, short form and long form, get shown on Thursday and Friday nights for the rest of the crowd. And then on Saturday, the winners are announced. And also the people at the Saturday banquet, awards banquet, get to choose the people's choice. So those who saw the films get a vote on what their favorites are. And then we give a third award, which is people's choice. So these films are really good. Out of the films, we've got 2 from Jose Escamilla. And many of you will know his name. He's the guy who first filmed and came up with the term Roswell rods. Now, there's some controversy that these Roswell rods are actually bugs and they're not UFOs or anything, but that's regardless of this, because he's submitting some films that are related to just imagery in space and possible UFO pictures and stuff like that. So Jose Escamilla, a lot of you will be familiar with his name. He's a very popular filmmaker. We're also have one from Tanya Maddenford. I think I told you guys about that last time. This one's called Packing for Mars, and she interviews a lot of UFO experts in this. Her documentaries are usually very well done, very interesting. We have Don Mears, and actually we interviewed Don Mears just a few weeks ago with Australian Skies, so you guys already know all about that. And then we have Paul Davids, and I'm going to talk about him in a minute in his film, because he's also a speaker, so we'll hold on to that one. In the short form, we have an interesting kind of film about abduction. It's just a short 15-minute film from a guy named Matthew Hayes. He's a photographer. And then we also have 3 short films submitted by Jeremy Corbell. Of course, we've interviewed Jeremy several times. And this is exciting because he's been talking about releasing his interviews with John Lear and others. So essentially, these are 3 shows. One of them is about George Knapp, Bob Lazar, but it does have George Knapp. In fact, it's essentially a short film about what does George Knapp think about Bob Lazar. And George Knapp is more candid than I have ever seen him before. And so that's what's great about this film. It's called Lazar, and I think it's the same with all of these. These are installments of ongoing series that he has. The John Lear documentary is called Immaculate Deception. John Lear, some of you will probably know, he has some really wild, out there ideas. He was friends with Bob Lazar, and so he also lives in the Las Vegas area. But he was the son of the guy who invented the Learjet and started Motorola, and his dad was just super famous. And John Lear had an interesting life. He's a pilot, and like he worked for the CIA and all this other crazy stuff. So he's an interesting guy, and then he believes just a lot of wild, wild stuff. And you get an idea of what John Lear is like in this film. It also has his grandson, so it's really interesting, and by far the most insight I think you can get into John Lear's life. And this is just the first installment of many. Corbell's third film is called Nano Man. He submitted a short, kind of the first in his series, on this last year. So this is the second. And this is really fascinating because this guy is an engineer. He's some kind of super genius dude. He's credentialed as working in some interesting places, and he has like a photon drive. So he created this propulsion system that I believe, if I understand correctly, is powered by light. And in the film, it's demonstrated that it works. It's got some sort of something in the device that allows it to move, because he goes out and demonstrates this to Jeremy. And of course, Jeremy does all of this in a very artful way. So, I think what's interesting about Jeremy's work is that you get to see more of the insight into what these people are really like. So those are going to be really exciting. So that's what's going on as far as the films go. And you can go to a lot of these people, their websites, to see some trailers or see more about it. However, when it comes to the conference, we start off on Wednesday. Usually what I'll do is do some UFO news for the year. But the first speaker we're going to have is Sam Maranto. Now, I've had on the show before, and he is out of Chicago. I even believe he's a MUFON director, state director for Illinois. But, he's been a researcher for a long time. He researches a couple cases, including the Chicago O'Hare case. Now, probably many of you will be familiar with the Chicago O'Hare UFO case. I think it's one of the most important ones to come across for a long time. So it's a really great one. And essentially in 2006, in November, a bunch of people over one of the gates in Chicago saw a craft, and they closed down the gates. The witnesses said it was a cylindrical craft, allegedly. This was over United and the United Gate Airlines. Supposedly, a lot of United Airlines staff and pilots had seen this thing. This craft moved straight up. There was some cloud cover, and it punched a hole in the clouds as it went, and that hole then just slowly closed as the clouds kind of filled it in. So it's an extraordinary case. Now, there aren't pilots or others who have gone on the record, and that's the hard part, because supposedly the airline told them not to talk about this. And really the number one researcher in this case is Sam Maranto. So we're going to get insights into what's going on with the case and who he's talked to. Allegedly there were pictures and video, but thus far we haven't been able to certainly verify that there are any images that are said to be related to this sighting are related to this sighting. And the alleged videos that existed have not come out thus far either. But I know Sam has some more information about that. He also has another really popular sighting called the Tinsley Park sightings, where it was another mass sighting that he'll be talking about. So that's really interesting. Paul Davids, I told you, submitted a film. Now, Paul Davids works in Hollywood as a filmmaker. He's made a lot of films, including the Roswell film. It was a Showtime special, and it aired many years ago. Kyle MacLachlan was a star in it. So was Martin Sheen and Dwight Yoakam, and a lot of stars in this movie about Roswell. And it was based off of essentially Dom Schmidt and Tom Carey's work. So some of the lead Roswell researchers, and by extension also Stanton Friedman's work. So it's a representation of their ideas of what happened at Roswell, and it's very well done. Great movie. However, Paul Davids is going to be speaking at the conference about the CIA, UFOs, and Marilyn Monroe, which is also the topic of his film. So, there are alleged documents out there that say Marilyn Monroe essentially knew something about UFOs, and that's probably why they killed her or something like that. But even more so, Paul Davids is putting together the pieces to show that there is some sort of shenanigans that went on with the death of Marilyn Monroe. It wasn't simply a drug overdose, as the official statements go. So that ought to be really interesting. Paul Davids, great guy. He's very animated. I mean, this guy gets really into what he's talking about, and he might even use some bad words. Jeremy Corbell said he's going to try to refrain from using bad words because there were some people in the audience who got a little upset with his, using of peppering, like the hipsters do these days, peppering their stuff with that sort of language. And, of course, the mean age at the conference is quite up there, so they didn't appreciate that. But we'll see. Paul Davids, man, he gets worked up, and you don't know what's going to happen. The other speaker we're going to have on Wednesday next is Chase Kletsky. Of course, we've had her on the show before as well. Chase is awesome because she's done a lot of research, and she has a really interesting case where just some real craziness went on. So she's in charge of a team called the SAT team. It's like the Special Access Team for MUFON. So they do particularly interesting investigations, and she's going to be speaking about that, including her remarkable personal experiences. The other one, of course, is Nick Redfern. Now, I had titled his talk The Real Men in Black, which is the name of his latest book. However, he's retitled it Men in Black, History and Mystery, or vice versa. But anyways, it's about just that, the history of the Men in Black, the mystery behind this phenomena of the Men in Black. And of course, the film Men in Black has made it real famous, but this is the idea that people say they have seen these guys dressed in black suits and driving old school black cars that come and threaten people when they see UFOs or aliens, or alleged to have. In fact, this is kind of weird. Here's a story I heard recently by a credible, to me, MUFON investigator, and it's an extraordinary tale. He says that he was investigating something. I can't remember what it was. This is in South Carolina, I believe. And that these Men in Black types came to him. And he said, he deals with, he's got his own business. He was a contractor or something similar to that. And he's used to dealing with officials and, having to haggle and argue about some things occasionally when it comes to permits or whatever. But these guys came and told him, you can't investigate that anymore. And he said, well, he looked up to tell them, you can't tell me what to do or, whatever. And he was seized with terror when he saw this tall guy and this short guy and this short guy's face, and he couldn't explain, the terror that he felt when he saw these people. He eventually snapped to and they had left, but he said it was just really strange experience. So oddly enough, how strange as it sounds and how ridiculous it sounds that there could be, some sort of, what some people think, aliens that are dressed in black suits or something. Nick Fern is going to go over this terribly interesting history of the Men in Black. And I think what's interesting is, especially during certain periods of time in ufology history, that you see a lot of these stories and they're similar. So that's going to be cool. A very controversial speaker will be wrapping up Wednesday. I'm trying to make every day really exciting. So we're ending Wednesday with a very controversial speaker, and that's Dr. David Jacobs. So he was a historian at Temple University, a professor there, and he's also into the abduction phenomena. From what I understand, he used to work with Bud Hopkins and John Mack, and in the New York area on this topic. And I know, he and Bud Hopkins work together closely, but he kind of has an interesting idea. He feels that UFOs are here, aliens are here, but that they could be getting us ready for kind of a takeover. That they're walking among us. I think that's what his latest book is called, Aliens Walk Among Us. So that's what he's going to be talking about. He feels that this whole phenomena is very nefarious, that it's not a good thing. And he's going to be talking about that. So that should be good. And he's kind of starting off the alien section because Thursday is Alien Day. We're going to be talking about really, abduction and of course, when it gets to aliens, it gets really wild and really out there and a lot going on. And that's what I'm going to be talking about. So I'm starting off on Thursday at 9 a.m. I'm going to be talking about strange alien encounters. Dun, dun, dun. And you may have heard me talk about this before because I've given this talk once or twice before, at least similar. I always update it, so it's a little different every time I give it. I'm really excited, though, because people usually really like it. It includes cases that aren't well known but are very interesting or very important. So that's why I'm really excited to give this talk. I'm also excited to give this talk because it will be documented. So even if you don't make it, you can buy the DVD and see it because I think these are really important. So for instance, I'm talking about a president of an Eastern European country who believes he's been abducted by aliens and he's talked to them and everything. So, I mean, this is the high-end guy. That's not even touching the surface. I'll be talking about one of the royal family who is interested in UFOs. This is, in the past, but something that had happened. This person has passed away, but his interest in UFOs and an alien encounter he believes happened on his homestead that he investigated himself. I'll be talking about one of the most important and influential, like I said earlier, cases, at least when it came to Steven Spielberg, something that really influenced him. So it'll also include an important case in Italy and one in Chile. Just these important, fascinating cases. Oh, and then one in not Hungary, somewhere up there, Denmark, I think it is. Or Czechoslovakia, that's where it is. One in Czechoslovakia. And they both have, the Italian one and the Czechoslovakian one especially, have some really cool imagery because they're very popular cases in their respective countries. And so there has been some really neat artwork that's happened over the years. So this is really cool. Okay, the other, after me is coming Barbara Lamb. Now, Barbara Lamb, if you haven't met her, I've interviewed her. Very sweet lady. She works out of California. She's a marriage and family therapist. And she just, she said when she was actually in school to become a therapist, there was this idea of abduction was introduced to her. Later on, she began to look into it, and then she began to get clients. Now she's talked to she's talked to thousands of people and regress them who believe they have been abducted. And her talk is called Meet the Hybrids. So she believed there may be alien hybrids, human alien hybrids walking among us, like David Jacobs. So she's going to kind of talk about how she came to that idea and her ideas behind that. And I know her ideas are different than Jacobs, not in that she believes everything is positive, but I think she's just kind of in the middle. She doesn't think everything's negative. Many people reference that idea, as above, so below, or whatever. It's like a saying or something like that. I don't know. You probably heard it. But that, just like things are here on the planet, there's good guys, there's bad guys. There's guys when you're driving in the morning that'll let you in. There's other guys that won't let you in. You got to go over. They honk and they flip you off, and it's bad news. So, they think it runs the gamut like that. So her talk is going to be great. After lunch, then we have Dr. Joe Lewells. Now, Dr. Joe Lewells was a professor of journalism. He also has done financial consulting and a whole manner of things, and he's also an author. His topic is going to be forbidden science, UFOs, and religion. And he's going to talk about similarities with UFOs and aliens and religion. He's also an abduction specialist. But he has more of a positive idea about all of this, how they're here to help us and stuff like this. So that's what he's going to be talking about, more along the positive end of things. After Joe Lewells, we have the very popular David Hatcher Childress, and you might recognize him from Ancient Aliens. He's in Ancient Aliens quite a bit on the television show. He's going to be talking about ancient aliens and megalithic construction. And I feel that as far as data and information, David Hatcher Childress probably has the best talk when it comes to ancient aliens. He just shows you item after item, location after location. He travels the world. He's truly like an Indiana Jones. He is traveling the world on a regular basis, visiting these places, investigating all of this stuff. He also has a book publisher, Adventures Unlimited. And what's great about his book publishing is that they republish old UFO books that have expired. And so he's really done a great job in allowing people to get access to these important books that otherwise they wouldn't have had access to. So David Hatcher Childress is always a very exciting, very popular, and great speaker. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And finally, speaking of a lot of fun, we're going to end that day with some fun. We're going to have a UFO Jeopardy. So we did this last year where we did a Jeopardy show. And essentially this guy, one of our guys who helps us out, Jordan Peace, who I've actually interviewed also on our program, he always helps with the AV on these events. And he has a Jeopardy game that he has bought the software for. And we did this last year where we had some of the speakers get together and play Jeopardy. So we tested each other's knowledge. And that was a lot of fun last year. So we're going to do that again. At the end of Thursday, we will have screenings, and also Ben Hansen will be doing a night vision skywatch. So if you remember Ben Hansen, he used to be the host of Fact or Faked. I've had him on the show many times, and he's a great guy. He owns a night vision optics company, and so he'll be also have some of his equipment there for us to use, so you can use it. Look through all of these amazing, high-end, expensive, but incredible night vision cameras and goggles and stuff like this, even night vision things that attach to your iPhone. So really cool stuff. And I should have mentioned, Wednesday night is when we have the Meet the Speakers welcome party, and that's kind of just a dinner. And we give away some prizes that are donated by the vendors, because we have a huge, bustling vendor room that's always busy with lots going on. And then, we raffle these door prizes off that night, and it's a lot of fun. We have tacos. It's a taco bar. So Friday, what's going on Friday? Chris Rutowski. So Chris Rutowski we've had on the show. His talk is called UFO, Canada and UFOs. Because he's Canadian, and he talks about that stuff. So he's done some amazing stuff around Canadian UFO reports. They have collected like the largest Canadian UFO collection at his website, and they've put out these reports where they've looked into these cases. His website is called Ufology Research. It's so you can just Google ufology research and you'll find him. So he's great. I'm a big fan of Chris Rutowski. He's a very grounded, level-headed guy. So he's going to be talking to us about some of these amazing Canadian UFO cases he's investigated. Speaking of someone level-headed and with an amazing case, next we're going to have Robert Powell. Robert Powell is a director of investigations or I'm sorry, the director of research for MUFON. However, he, along with others, um, they call themselves the SCU. I'm kind of a part of this SCU, really, but they're the Scientific Coalition for Ufology, and they investigated the Homeland Security video. Of course, we've talked about that a lot. We've had Robert on. We've had other people with the SCU on to talk about this Homeland Security video. But essentially, this UFO flew over Puerto Rico, was filmed by Homeland Security planes that were looking for drug runners with their infrared camera system. This object kind of flew over the water, came back over this airstrip, and the people on the ship did not understand what it was. They use these things to look for stuff all the time, but the guys on the plane didn't know what the hell it was, so they tried to get it looked at. It eventually got into the hands of some UFO researchers, including Morgan Bial, who's a MUFON Florida State Director, and Robert and Rich Hoffman and a bunch of other guys. I apologize, I don't have all their names, but Robert Powell is going to be going over this case. There also have been some experts, including a guy I've been able to talk to, who just don't know what this are, and these are IR experts. That's what's great about this case, is you have actually some expert opinion and analysis, whereas typically it's just kind of amateurs who are doing their best to give you some information. So there's been some controversy about this, but thus far, the experts are pretty unanimous in that they don't know what it is. And some people feel that they do, but I think that they need to counter the expert opinion and demonstrate how they're right and some of these experts are wrong. And these experts, I know, are gracious enough to and also interested enough, and they will look at this material some more and concede if there's an answer that can be discovered. But thus far, there has not been one. That's why this case is amazing. And so Robert Powell is going to go over that case, some animation he has done to demonstrate, how this thing maneuvered, and give us the latest on that. After lunch on Friday is John Greenwald, Inside the Black Vault, a 2-decade journey into the declassified world of government secrecy. So, of course, John Greenwald, many of you know him. He's been on the show. He's a friend of the show. He's a friend to me. He's a friend to my friends. He's a friendly fella. Although he's very conservative, don't talk liberal politics with him. Then friendliness is out the window. He just turns ugly and mean. No, I'm kidding. He's actually he's unless you're a politician, then he won't be so into you. But he has the Black Vault. He's got millions of files that he has had declassified through FOIA. He's been doing this since he was a very young man, a teenager, a little high schooler, and we've talked about this in interviews, and he's uncovered some very interesting things, and we'll be talking about that. In fact, one of the things he's uncovered, or not uncovered, but one of the controversies he got all mixed up in recently was these Blue Book files. So Lee and I and Martin spoke about that on the last show, the Year in Review. So yeah, John Greenwald does great work. Also, after John Greenwald is Nick Pope. Nick Pope, of course, used to work for the Ministry of Defense in the 90s investigating UFOs. Some people are like, well, why are you going to have this government guy? He's obviously a mouthpiece for the government. Well, you know what? If he is, Nick Pope has gone out there and he has brought credibility to this field practically like no other. I mean, he's been on Fox News multiple times. He's in the media all over the place talking about how UFOs are a topic, that there is a genuine mystery and something that has to be investigated. And unless, his mission is to get out there and to get credibility into the UFO phenomena, and if that's the case, he's done a great job at it. I don't know. I think people need to chill out. about that stuff because I just don't buy it. Although he does admit, there are some things we've interviewed him. I've had him on the show, and the last time I had him on was about his recent book on the Rendlesham Force, an important UK case. And I said, well, are there things, if the government told you don't put it in the book, would you not put it in the book? And he said, I wouldn't. I wouldn't put it in the book. But they didn't tell me that. And I said, well, if they did, would you tell us? He said, I don't know, maybe not. I just don't get the feeling. He's on the record, off the record. He doesn't seem like they told him to keep anything secret in that book or any other way. But this is really good because I think he's the best person to do this. His talk at our conference is going to be disclosure: who, what, where, when, and why. And I think this is going to be a very interesting analysis because he's someone who has been in the inner workings when it comes to politics. He's also maneuvered through media. He's essentially a journalist at this point. So he understands a lot of the high level and behind the scenes when it comes to this topic. So it's going to be interesting to hear how he thinks, to hear, his insight into these topics. Then finally, this night, we will have, maybe you were thinking it, maybe you weren't, but when I think about, abduction researchers, us having an abduction researcher who's certain they're evil, having an abduction researcher who says they're definitely good, and having one right in the middle, we need a panel. We need these guys to hash it out. We need to ask them some questions and get them talking, a dialogue, and see, maybe do a cage match type of thing, and see who comes out alive. Now, actually, these are all professionals. I mean, you have Dr. Jacobs, the two most polarized, Dr. Joe Lewels and Dr. Jacobs, both former professors, professionals who are used to debating in a professional manner. So these are the guys on each polar side. Then you have Barbara Lamb, who's kind of somewhere in the middle. And with Barbara Lamb in the middle is going to be the host of this panel, which is Yvonne Smith. She is a therapist and hypnotherapist who's also worked in this for a very long time. And I think her views align more similar to Barbara, although I think Barbara and Yvonne both feel there are points of agreement that they have with Dr. Joe Lewels and Dr. David Jacobs. But, as I talk about this, how interesting is that going to be? So this is cool. So Friday evening, that's what we've got. The panel is called The Alien Abduction Agenda. Ooh. So this is going to be good because we're going to have these four people hash it out, talk, are they good, are they bad, what's going on? The likelihood of them getting up there and talking and then saying, you know what, I think we figured it out, here's what the deal is, and then we're all going to know what's going on, is unfortunately slim. However, you will be able to hear the arguments, why they're all good, why they're all bad, why they're both good and bad, on the stage with people who have looked at this and lived, this phenomena, and heard from among them, thousands of people who believe they've been abducted by aliens. So I think there's certainly going to be a lot that we'll all be able to learn from this discussion. And that's what I really love doing with these panels, is putting people together who are professionals, who have different viewpoints, to kind of hash it out and to attempt to come to an understanding. But at least it puts them in an environment where they can discuss professionally, and then hopefully going forward, they'll be able to work together in a professional manner. And I think that's the whole point. That's what the Congress is about. It's 5 days where people get together, spend these 5 days together, discussing and getting information about these topics and building friendships and networking, building just working relationships so that we can all work together to move forward. I think that's something that the UFO Congress has been the most important venue for that sort of work ever since it was incepted 25 years ago. This is the 25th anniversary, people. Holy smokes. You kidding me? So, yeah, 25 years of this. So, that's what I'm really excited about. This panel is going to be a lot of fun. After the panel, this is unique. We have Keith Aram, the filmmaker who created the movie The Phoenix Incident, the movie premiere screening, the U.S. movie premiere is going to be right here at the UFO Congress. This movie is going to be screened, and it's going to be incredible. So, how cool is this? This is free of charge, open to the public. I'm sure we're going to have to turn people away for this. We just won't have this space, but yeah, people will get to see this film for the first time, and Keith Aram, who created the film, who we had on the show not too long ago, will be able to talk about it. And of course, there's some controversy around Keith and the marketing of this film, because I don't know, there's a little out there now, I know, and there was some out there, of course, a year ago, where they were pretending to be like a real news organization, and, well, among others, but, you know, we busted them. And we were like, hey, you're not fooling us, dude. And then they're like, hey, we were just marketing, you know, and for our movie. And so they got a hold of us. And at first I was like, dude, come on, not cool. But he was like, well, you know, here's my idea around marketing. Why don't we talk it out? And so we did. And that's what it's all about. So he wants a chance to show his film, but he really wants to highlight the field and the real UFO researchers because he's into real UFOs investigation. And so that's what he's going to be doing at the conference. And hey, that's cool, I think. So that's Friday night. And every morning and evening, we do have experiencer sessions. That's also something that I think other conferences have adopted, but that was done first at the UFO Congress, and that is people like Yvonne Smith. In fact, it's headed by Yvonne Smith. These discussions, group sessions with people who believe they've had experiences and they can share those experiences. No press are allowed in this room. At least they can go in the room, but they can't take notes or take pictures or anything like that. This is just something where people can feel comfortable sharing their stories and experiences. So that will be going on Friday night and Friday, every evening and morning at the conference. Saturday, the big day. So Saturday we have Claude Swanson starting off the day. His topic is going to be what the science of the torsion field can teach us about UFOs. Claude Swanson, I believe, was my very first interview for a podcast. So my first podcast was UFO Think Tank. Some of you might remember that if you were there all the way from the beginning. And Claude I've known for a long time. Now, he's impressive. He is a physicist, a theoretical physicist. He was educated at MIT and Princeton. He worked at the MIT Science Teaching Center. He worked at Brookhaven National Laboratory. He worked at a Virginia cyclotron. He worked in Princeton for the National Science Foundation Fellowship. He's worked for a number of defense companies, just all kinds of really interesting stuff. And he believes that the science of a lot of things in the paranormal, including UFO propulsion, are all similar. He calls it torsion because torsion is the Russian word for this term. In China, they call it qi, and Dr. Wilhelm Reich called it orgone. So he's talking about an energy, like a he'll have to explain. I don't want to say subtle force or something because that's probably not the right term. But essentially, this energy out there that connects all of these things and is part of our brain that he thinks that can explain a lot of the things that are unexplainable and makes all of this possible. So this is gonna. It's just I've seen him talk many times. Every time I'm completely fascinated, especially those interested in, well, I shouldn't say especially, those interested in science, the paranormal, UFOs, psychic ability, ghosts, all of this stuff, I think will find his talk just fascinating. So I am really excited that he'll be speaking because I know people are rarely going to enjoy his talk. After Claude Swanson, we have a very unique experience, and that is Luigi Venditelli and Emily Trim. Of course, we had Luigi on our show. He was live right here in our conference room, and he was accompanied by a surprise guest, and that is Emily Trim. So Luigi talks about ET contacts. He has some very interesting cases he has investigated over the time. So that's going to be great, including this interesting photo. I'm not sure if he's going to show it, but we talked about it on our show when we interviewed him. However, he's going to be also introducing Emily Trim, who was one of the witnesses at the Ariel School incident. So many of you familiar with John Mack are probably familiar with pretty much his most popular case, which were these kids in Ruwa, Zimbabwe, at this school called the Ariel School, and there was a schoolyard of these kids who said they saw a UFO land and an alien come out of it. Teachers thought they were kidding at first, then they discovered they weren't. They were very serious about all of this. Emily is one of those witnesses, and she'll be talking about her experiences, but also how these experiences influenced her. So last year we had the Allagash abduction guys, these guys that apparently or feel as though they were abducted. They certainly saw, they all say they saw a UFO out in Allagash, Maine, and then experienced this strange stuff. And they were all artists, and their art had changed. But Emily has begun to do art that she thinks is influenced by her experiences. Her art includes all of these symbols, and she feels that she can translate these symbols. These symbols mean something to her, even though you look at them and they look pretty random. So, and I think what's interesting and unique about Emily is that she's young. She's a younger person, and you don't hear, people in their 20s talking about having these sort of experiences. But, we know as a child, she was one of those children out there. So this is a really unique experience because to know the Ariel School incident is to be fascinated by it. Everyone who has heard of this case, it's kind of one of the most interesting cases they've ever come across. So go Google it, Ariel School incident, if you're not aware of it. If you are aware of it, you'll understand why I'm so excited that Emily Trim will be there. And she's going to have a table in the vendor room the whole time where she's going to be showing this artwork. And I think she's even going to be selling it on our page. I have pictures of it on the Congress page under, if you click her name. So really pretty stuff. We've got one or two here that she left for us. But just a really sweet person. I mean, I spent time with her, and I was just so fascinated. She just comes across such a genuine, sweet, kind of shy girl. She's just adorable. She's great. So I think people will definitely enjoy that, and those who are interested will be able to meet her in the vendor room and ask her questions as well. After that, after lunch on Saturday, we kind of have, kind of our keynote block. And after lunch, we have Ruben Langdon and Jeremy Corbell. Jeremy, of course, doing the films in the film festival. But Jeremy will be talking a little bit about Lazar, and then but more to the point, why we had them is Jeremy and Reuben Langdon. Reuben Langdon's a Hollywood guy. He's a stuntman. He does filming. He was like one of the Power Rangers. He's a karate guy, and so they've used him as a body double in movies and stuff like this. So he's entrenched in the Hollywood scene, but he's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, and he helped put together the citizen hearing on disclosure. So most people know Stephen Bassett when it comes to the citizen hearing on disclosure, but one of the guys who helped put this together is Reuben Langdon, and Reuben's job was to film the whole thing and create a documentary. Well, they ran out of money. They did film it. They did release the DVDs, but they need some more funds to create the movie. And the reason, and they're not asking for money. And that, I'm sure that's kind of a breath of fresh air for a lot of you, because a lot of people in this field want donations. What they want to do is sell the DVDs and use that money to create the documentary. So they're going to talk about this, but more what their talk is going to be about and why it's exciting and why it's important to be in this spot is they're going to show us some of the best footage from the citizen hearing on disclosure. And of course, that was an event that went on a couple years ago where they brought a panel of former Congresspeople to watch for a week the testimony from dozens of witnesses to UFO and alien-related stuff. Some of the people we've talked about that are going to be speaking were there actually to present. So these Congresspeople, it was a mock congressional hearing. So these Congresspeople can see what they think about the whole thing and maybe give some input. So this is great because we're going to see some of that footage in the best of the citizen hearing and some of the behind the scenes, some stuff nobody's ever seen before. One of the exciting things is that one of these former congressmen, Merrill Cook, who was in the House of Representatives representing an area of Utah, will be there. Also, he's going to be speaking after Reuben and Jeremy, and he was skeptical. But he attended this mock hearing as one of the congressmen, and he was convinced, essentially. He felt that not everything was his cup of tea, but that there were certainly enough credible and convincing witnesses and information and testimony given that he really feels there is some sort of cover-up or there's information that is not being shared. So he's going to speak on UFO disclosure. So that's really exciting. I mean, that's a first. I don't think, this is going to be really great. He participated in a panel or two at another event, but this is him having the time to talk himself, and I think that's what's really exciting. Then finally, of course, we're very excited to have Jacques Vallée, our very own Lee Spiegel. I call him our very own because he's on our show a lot and he's my buddy and he feels like our very own. He actually works for the Huffington Post. But Lee will be doing a Q&A with Jacques Vallée, and this is really exciting. It's called UFOs and Science, Bringing Together Clarity and Credibility, Not Ridicule, because the topic is ridiculed so much. But Jacques Vallée is probably one of the most important UFO researchers out there. He's the UFO researcher, I kind of call him, because every UFO researcher gets really excited when you talk about Vallée. He worked with and was a student of J. Allen Hynek, who was an astronomer and a consultant to the U.S. Air Force. Vallée was also an astronomer. He also was a computer scientist. He is also a venture capitalist. In fact, in this huge, very expensive and elaborate monthly business gathering in Saudi Arabia, he was able to arrange there to be a UFO track where he brought Nick Pope, Stanton Friedman, and some other names out there to talk about UFOs. So that was really interesting. But Jacques is a very important person. He's written some really important books, one of the best minds in this field. And I don't think he has ever spoken at a UFO conference. He doesn't like doing that. He's very mainstream. So this is a unique experience. This is a once in a lifetime, one and only type of thing, just like Bob Lazar was last year. So myself and I know many others are just besides ourselves that Jacques would be doing this and that we're all going to have the opportunity to meet him and to watch this monumental and UFO circles or ufology, certainly many of us feel historic event. So this is really exciting. Then we have our EBE Awards. We'll find out who won what when it comes to the movies, huh? The EBE Film Festival. I told you about those films earlier. They all sound pretty dang good. Who's going to win? I don't know. We'll find out on Saturday. So you can come wear a tux and come watch this thing. There is, at least I know, the Phoenix MUFON guy wears a tux every time. Some others do, but people are very dressed great. They just look wonderful. Lee will be there. Martin is probably going to have some fancy suit. He's going to be looking like $1 million. The ladies are going to go crazy for him. I know it. So come see Martin and everybody in their best get-ups, and that'll be a lot of fun. Sunday wraps things up, and Sunday, of course, we start off, and Sunday is one of my favorite days. I mean, I think we're really ending this with some really exciting stuff here. Starts off with Doug Trumbull and Mark D'Antonio. So I've talked a lot about Doug Trumbull, and you can probably get it. I'm excited. Whoop-de-doo. Settle down. I can't settle down, people. I'm just too excited. But, yeah, I'm really happy that Doug Trumbull, the special effects legend, guru, super guru, legendary, Saiyan level, super Saiyan, just in super duper uber to me. I mean, this guy's done the special effects for my favorite movies. 2001, Close Encounters, Blade Runner. Come on, get out of here. Get out of here. So that's really exciting. And he's into UFOs in a credible way, grounded way, does some really cool stuff. And then here, I've had him on the show, but he hasn't spoken very often, and that is Dr. Ron Westrom. He actually showed up at the UFO Congress last year, and I'm surprised because this guy's like a big deal. He was a professor of sociology at Eastern Michigan University. He got his BA at Harvard. He got his PhD at the University of Chicago in sociology, and that's what he specializes in, mostly in the sociology of science and technology. He's written several books, some of those being Technologies in Society, The Shaping of People and Things, Sidewinder, Creative Missile Design at China Lake, and others. And like he's a consultant for big defense companies. He's also into UFOs. Huh? What do you know? He's a consultant for MUFON. He's going to be talking about hidden events, and this is fascinating because he's going to look back into the past at events, scientific events, where it was a rumor that something existed. It was a rumor that meteorites existed. Scientists are like, yeah, come on. What, the rocks falling from the sky and we can see them at night? That's stupid. You idiot. Get away. Get out of here. But, over time we found out, scientists said, well, according to my calculations, there really are. And so people came out, okay, well, there are meteorites. I was saying that all along. I knew there were. I didn't say something at first. I was making fun of Bob, but, I was just giving him some stuff. I knew there were meteorites. So everybody, jumps on board and takes it as a given. You know how people get it. It's annoying as hell. You do it too. Come on, I do it. No, I don't think I'm pretty good at admitting when I'm wrong, I think. You guys have heard me admit I'm wrong. I'll admit I'm wrong all day long. I've got to keep a healthy relationship. A man has to admit he's wrong all day long. But regardless, what I'm trying to say here is that Dr. Ron Westrom has examined how this happens, and how the UFO phenomena fits into that model, and how he believes we're there now. He believes that we're at that point where there are people saying, "Hey, there's a phenomena here," and there's others saying, "Yeah, right. Come on, these bunch of goofballs. Look at these tinfoil hat wearing weirdos. Watching X-Files, and what a bunch of dorks." But he believes we're in that stage where, hopefully soon the mainstream will come to embrace this idea that there are some mysterious sightings and things going on, and that we'll be able to make fun of those goofballs, those closed-minded, you-know-what, huh? Speaking of bad words over here, those goofballs that were just kind of being jerky. And they are being jerky. Ask Lee Spiegel about the media not covering this topic appropriately and getting things wrong. Oh, man, he will chew your ear off, and he is so upset as his mainstream colleagues about that. So hopefully that era will be changing, and Dr. Westrom's going to give us some fascinating insight into that. And then finally, we're going to wrap things up with a panel just on that topic. Mainstream attitudes towards UFOs. So hopefully we'll have Doug Trumbull. If we're really lucky, we'll have Jacques Vallée, but we'll have Lee Spiegel, Nick Pope, as many people as we can fit on a little stage. They may have to stand. It may be really crowded and awkward. But hey, awkward is in. That's why Martin is so cool. Doesn't he do awkward good? Those awkward pauses and just when we did the news earlier today, wasn't that awkward? And that's delightful, delightfully awkward. That's Martin Willis. He won't be in that panel, but he'll be talking with me about that panel afterwards on this show because he will be present at the conference. So you'll be able to meet him if you go there. So who doesn't want to meet Martin? He's great. I love meeting. Every time I meet that guy, I love it. The guy is just awesome. That's it. That's going to be the conference. I think that's extremely exciting. I think it's certainly worthy of the 25th anniversary of what arguably could be the most important UFO conference, annual UFO conference ever in existence in the history of mankind. When, if Ron Westrom's right and this all comes out, they'll be thinking back on the UFO Congress and how it's kind of like the meeting of the founding fathers. That's that high level of esteem that I imagine the UFO Congress will be held in future generations. Yeah. And you want to be there. So, yeah, hopefully y'all can join us. That's February 17th, or like I said, come on the 16th to watch the films. That's free and open to the public. Anyone can volunteer to be a judge. And the requirement, though, is that you have to watch all the films. We'll show the short films first, the long films second. Hopefully we'll have kind of a list of what we're showing when here soon. But you got to, if you can be a judge just for short films, or you can be judge for long films. That's fine. If you're a short person, you don't have to just judge the short films. You can also judge the long films, just in case those short people. And the same goes for the tall people, just in case you're curious. And so this is going to be a lot of fun. Some really cool stuff. As usual, I guess I'm going to wrap this up and say goodbye to everybody. The stories that Martin and I spoke about earlier today all can be seen at openminds.tv. And like I said in the show too, this Friday we're going to have a Open Minds UFO report. We didn't have one last week. We're just getting so busy right now that it's really hard for us to do the radio shows and the UFO report because we're just swamped with getting everything ready, making sure everything's registered, and everything's going to run very smoothly for the conference. And no, kidding aside, it's difficult for me to put kidding aside. In fact, I can't 100% do it. But in all seriousness, we do work really, really hard to make this conference as seamless and professional as possible. We want the attendees and the speakers' experiences to be completely professional, very comfortable, and satisfying for everyone. So we want them to have no trepidation, no worries about anything on either end. And I think that if you talk with other speakers or if you talk with other attendees, they'll tell you that was the case. Luckily, we have a very good reputation, and thankfully so, and because our reputation has afforded us to get speakers like Bob Lazar or Jacques Vallée and Doug Trumbull. And really, that has mostly been due to our reputation. So when people ask, how do you guys get these guys? Well, we just work really hard to have a very professionally ran event. And that's how, by working so hard on that. I mean, we get really stressed out. We cry. There's some crying involved periodically throughout the entire event. And I'll admit, I'm probably the one crying the most. I'm about to cry right now, just thinking about it. Not really, but I have cried. I'm not going to lie. I'm a modern man who can admit that. My sisters, my girlfriend called me a crybaby. But that's besides the point. I'm getting off track again. Anyway, we work really hard on that. So I think that it's just something that I hope that everyone will try to experience at least once. Who knows how long we'll be able to do these conferences. Open Minds, as I've said many times before, does not work. We don't make money, Open Minds. We try, but luckily for us, we have a benefactor whose purpose, whose priority is getting out the information, and he's willing to really spend money to get you information, and that's what he's doing. But at least we do recover much of our costs with this conference for what we do all year long. Thank you all so much for listening, and thank you for listening throughout the year, because getting this information out to you all is something that we really like to do and work hard in doing, not just this show, but with the website openminds.tv every day, with the YouTube videos, and with the conference. So it's just another component. And the great part with the conference is that we're able to meet all of you and say hi and shake hands and spend some time together. And you all get to spend some time together. And I think that's the best. When this is a beautiful resort, the Weekapaw Resort that we hold the conference in. It's absolutely gorgeous. Plenty of room with seating all around it in this beautiful desert environment, and people get to spend just a lot of time talking and meeting new people. There's some hookups. I can't guarantee a hookup, but that happens, so there's that. So there's love in the air. Last year we had Valentine's Day during the whole thing, so there was just, at least yeah, there's love in the air all the time too. So hopefully you can make it. Otherwise, I'm going to do my best to have another show coming on the air next week. Of course, things get really difficult with the conference. I cannot make any promises, but thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Caleb Hanks for the opening and close music. Speaking of love, I love that guy. Thanks for Martin Willis from Podcast UFO for helping us with the UFO news at the beginning of the show. I love that guy too. I really do. He's excellent. And I love every single one of you. Talk to you soon, and adios.